Alright, hi everyone, and welcome back to a new video. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Rachel, and if you've been around a while, welcome back. Hi, hello. I've been diving quite a bit into Daily Wire people recently in a few videos over the last few months. We talked about Matt Walsh and Candace Owens and people like that, and so I thought it was finally time I tackled Brett Cooper. I don't know about my audience, but my real life friends had been asking me to make this video for so damn long. Like, I have this whiteboard in my kitchen living room area where I have like my little monthly schedule of events that are coming up and stuff like that, and every time my friend Nick is over, he writes on it, "Make Brett Cooper video," in like big letters. So he has been asking for this for ages. This is for you, Nick, basically. But for those of you who don't know who Brett Cooper is, congratulations, your life is so much better than mine. But for context, she is a 24-year-old right-wing political commentator who used to host the Daily Wire show/YouTube channel, The Comment Section with Brett Cooper, but these days, since around January 2025, she's gone independent and has her own YouTube channel. I think it's The Brett Cooper Show or something completely original like that.
Recently, in my opinion, it has been the Me Too movement and the lasting impacts of that really unfairly generalized men as predators, which led to massive reputational damage. Innocent until proven guilty was basically thrown out in the courts of social media, in the actual courts of law. Like, that has just not been a thing anymore. There was and still is this attack on toxic masculinity, which stereotyped, normal male traits like stoicism or assertiveness as being inherently harmful.
These days, she still contributes to things like Fox News quite regularly, and in the past, she has worked with the nightmare that is PragerU. I don't know if I've ever made a video just about PragerU, but I feel like I should because, it's bad, isn't it? It's really bad. Like, I know it's come up in other videos where I've been talking about certain people, but I don't know if I've ever done one just dedicated to that. Let me know in the comments if you want me to, because that would be a journey. But anyway, Fox News, PragerU, The Daily Wire. I think that tells you a hell of a lot about who Brett Cooper is and what her politics and views and values are. One New York Times article about Brett had the tagline, "Brett Cooper is spreading conservatism one celebrity drama at a time." The YouTuber set out to reach young conservatives who felt alienated by mainstream culture. Now she's the newest face at Fox News, though dreaming of her own goop. Yeah, like that goop. And you know how I feel about the overpriced pseudoscientific nonsense that preys on people's vulnerabilities, that is goop and other pseudoscience and woo like that. I think one of my videos reviewing some of the goop products was one of my first videos I ever did on YouTube, actually, and it was quite interesting. They had things like psychic vampire repellent that you could spray to keep psychic vampires away so they wouldn't suck your energy. They had jade yoni eggs that you stuffed inside your vagina, except the fact that the jade they were made from was incredibly porous and basically just a breeding ground for bacteria, so you were risking major infections by doing that. It was a lot. If I can find it, I'll link that video below, but it's probably very old and not very good. But anyway, I think this alone, again, says a lot about Brett's morals and how she prioritizes her ambitions over the well-being of her audience. Plus, for someone who claims to be against feminism, and she brings that up in pretty much every video, she goes, "Feminism's bad, it's feminism's fault, blame feminism." For someone who claims to be against feminism, she is, in the same vein as people like Candace Owens and Just Pearly Things, actively benefiting from feminism constantly. She is a massive hypocrite. She has millions of subscribers, she makes plenty of money for herself, she works whilst being a mother and wife, she is active in mainstream politics, and she wants her own goop-style business empire, none of which she could even come close to doing without feminism. Now, this video isn't a deep dive into Brett Cooper in general because I don't quite have the emotional or physical energy for that at the minute with my ongoing health issues, which you may know about. I hate my uterus. That's all I'll say for now. But what I do want to do is pick over one of her latest videos and respond to it. This is kind of what I started doing when I first started my YouTube channel. I would pick a video and respond to it, and it was nice and not too deep or emotionally impactful. And I thought maybe I'd go back and do a few of those again because they feel like what I can manage with my workload right now. So if you guys are happy with that, I'll probably make a few more of this style of video in the coming weeks, if that's okay. The one we're going to be responding to today is about her hypocritical views about being a woman, dating, marriage, and motherhood, and there's some really harmful stuff in here, but she also has plenty of videos about other topics as well. She's very She is very against immigration, she hates trans people, and she is constantly belittling famous women who just so happen to be more successful and beautiful and talented than her, but that's nothing to do with it. It's definitely not jealousy. She's just concerned about them. So if you'd like to see me cover any of her other videos, or any other videos in general, again, leave me a comment below and let me know, please. But today, the one we're talking about is women are wrong about what men really want, which sounds like it will infuriate me from the title alone, right? And it's even more annoying when you realise that throughout this video, Brett is just constantly blaming women for things that are pretty much men's faults. It's like, men have this flaw, and she's like, and then women complain about this, and how bad is that because the women are doing it? And it's like, really? But that's just like some of the video. The rest of it is honestly like quite a muddled mess. It's all over the place. The premise of this video is basically about her responding to things she saw on Twitter, or X as it's now called, which you know is just a hub of American anger, hate and bigotry at this point. Yet she seems to think it's indicative of every person around the world ever. It's like she seems completely incapable of understanding that people in other cultures exist. So I think that says a lot about Brett in general. But let's watch this video, and this is how she opens.
Well, guys, according to X, my husband probably hates my postpartum body and is statistically proven to leave me. There is a raging debate on X right now about women's postpartum bodies, what that means for their attractiveness and their marriages, and women wanting to have children or being too afraid to have children.
I mean, yeah, sadly that does often happen. There's both stats and plenty of anecdotal evidence to suggest that this is true in a lot of cases. Not all, of course, but quite a lot. Stats also show that, sadly, men are more likely to leave their wives if they get a serious illness like cancer too. If a man is diagnosed with something like cancer, then chances are their wife or partner will stay with them. But if a woman gets it, especially if it's something like breast cancer or ovarian cancer, there's a much higher chance that their male partner will leave them. It's a sad statistical truth. And again, this is not saying all men will do this. Stats aren't prescriptive, they're descriptive. But it's something that has happened to plenty of women and continues to happen, and it's something that we can't just ignore and pretend isn't happening, you know? But what does this have to do with the title of the video and this all being women's fault? Well, don't worry, we'll get there after a long, long journey into Brett's mind. Before then, she needs to make a massive deal about a stupid joke some woman made on Twitter. Like, it's harmless.
But there was one post in particular that made me want to talk about this. It was a viral tweet from last week from this girl named Nicole, and she posted a meme from Gossip Girl of Leighton Meester, and she said, y'all really want to get married and have sex with the same person for the rest of your life? All capital letters. The audacity, the insanity. And so that was posted on October 5th, and it has a whopping 20 million views. 20 million impressions on X.
Yeah, so it got a bunch of views and a few thousand likes, but so what? It's a joke from someone saying they can't imagine being in a monogamous relationship forever, and some other non-monogamous people agreed and found it funny and gave it a like. That's all. It doesn't warrant a 20-minute video being made about it, you know? Or maybe it's not even just about, like, non-monogamy at all. Maybe it's just this person laughing because they know that, you know, marriage is a huge commitment, and they know it's something that they aren't personally ready for at this point in their life, and they're chuckling about the idea that, like, ooh, other people are doing that, or, you know, maybe one day I'll do that. Isn't it a huge thing? It's a joke. It's just a harmless, silly joke. It's not a big deal. It's not that deep. This is literally just one woman on Twitter, and she is, you know, she is representative of a lot of women out there, but she's also not representative of a lot of women. There are still plenty of people who want that monogamy, they want that committed relationship, they want that long-term marriage, and they look forward to it. Plenty of people don't. This is just a silly joke for them. If it doesn't refer to you, just move on, scroll past it. It's not a big deal. It's not actively judging you in any way. It's just this person being like, oh, can you believe? Like, it's fine. It's like, to give you an analogy, right? Imagine if I saw a post that was like, imagine not being a cat person, and then it had this like little GIF reaction thing, right? And then a bunch of people saw it and giggled at it because they're like, oh my god, yeah, I'm a cat person too. Imagine not being like this, I can totally relate, and they left a like. And then I come along and I see this and I personally take offense because, well, I'm not a cat person and I don't have a cat. and I actually have a dog, and I have no desire to have a cat. Therefore, this joke on Twitter must be personally attacking me. And what is wrong with our world? This is what's wrong with people. This is what feminism's done. It's turning people into these cat-loving maniacs. Isn't this disgusting and disgraceful? Let me make a 20-minute video about it. Can you imagine that? That's what's happening here. And it's not just Brett who's blowing this out of proportion. One of these women that, I don't know if it's like a friend of hers or someone she works with or something like that, but she went on and wrote a whole article basically inspired predominantly by this tweet and also a Call Her Daddy podcast episode. She wrote a whole article for Evie magazine about this. Now, I have issues with Evie magazine in and of itself. I have made a whole video about it. Again, if you want to watch it, I'll link it below. But for now, let's see what Brett and this woman have to say.
But Gina Florio, who I adore, she wrote a great piece about this post in particular for Evie magazine, where she laid out the argument for commitment, for marriage, and she titled it, "Is it boring to sleep with one person for the rest of your life? The truth behind this viral post on X." And in this article, she basically talked about why this tweet is so unsurprising in our current landscape due to the cultural messages that women have received about marriage and sex and what it means to be an empowered woman over the last couple of decades. And, you know, her article was very spot on about a lot of things. She also talked about the dangers of promiscuous hookup culture and not having a steady partner.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack here. And I mean, just from the headline alone, right? Is it boring to sleep with one person for the rest of your life? I can answer that for you without writing a several hundred-word article about it. For some people, yes. For other people, no. For other people, it depends on who that partner is. Done. No more needs to be said. It's really not a big deal. Just let people do what they want. I do feel like, in general, choice feminism has its problems, and I am not a choice feminist. I would call myself an intersectional feminist. But in this case, I think when it comes to like what kind of relationship you want, yeah, choice is the important thing. Just let people choose what they want. They're not harming anyone. It's not a big deal. Go for it, you know? And as for that last bit about the dangers of promiscuous hookup culture and not having a steady partner, well, that's a bit more complicated, isn't it? All types of relationships come with risks and benefits. I think we can all agree on that. And I think it should be up to the individual to be allowed to figure out for themselves which risks to them are worth it and which aren't. But before I dive into that a little bit deeper, I decided to look up the Evie article to see exactly what was said. First up, I want to talk about the opening of the article in which they mention the podcaster from the Call Her Daddy podcast talking about having slept with multiple men. It doesn't even say how many. Multiple men could mean 3, it could mean 300. It could be anywhere in between, it doesn't specify. So the article says, it's all about free sex with whoever you're attracted to, and that free sex is marketed as the most fun, fulfilling, and erotic sex known to womankind. This message has been shoved down our throat for decades now. One of the first TV shows that packaged sex in such a way was HBO's Sex and the City, and who could forget Samantha in particular. And it was all downhill from there. Today, women are bred from a young age to believe that having sex with just one person for the rest of their lives is one of the most boring, devastating endings to an otherwise exciting life. And sure, there are some shows that show the positive sides of having multiple sexual partners. I won't doubt that, I won't deny that. I think they exist, and I think they're a great thing. But there's also plenty of media, perhaps the majority, which still pushes the idea that we all need to, especially women, find the one and settle down. That is still the majority of media. Kind of unfortunately, you know? The idea that kids are being indoctrinated from a young age to think they need multiple partners is wild, since in the past, kids have constantly been told, myself included when I was younger, that we need to settle down and find the one as soon as possible. Just look at almost every single Disney film from before 2010 as an example. Name one Disney princess before Merida who didn't settle down and find the one while she was still a teenager. You know what I mean? But for some reason, conservatives don't see that as propaganda or indoctrination or pushing an agenda just because it matches their own. The fact is that kids are influenced from all the media they see from a young age, and that includes the ones telling them get married, have kids as young as possible, you know? These Disney love stories, the rom-coms, the idea that like so much media is centered around finding your person, the one, getting married, doing all this stuff. Like kids do take that in as much as they would take in well, I don't know why a kid is watching Sex and the City. That doesn't really happen. But do you know what I mean? Yeah, anyway. But the fact is now that we have media that is more diverse than ever, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but different media promotes different values, and this is a good thing. Different media shows different lifestyles and the pros and cons of each, which is a good thing. Plenty of films and TV and books show the darker sides of monogamy too, and plenty show the darker sides of non-monogamy. Again, this is a good thing to show the whole spectrum of experiences. It's good that there is a mix out there showing different opinions and the pros and cons of each, so each person can watch them and say, oh, I like this about this, I don't like this about this, maybe in my own life I could try this, this and this, because I see there are options available, I know I have options, I'm going to choose my option. It's that simple. Anyway, going back to the article and the bit in regards to the dangers of promiscuity, it says, having multiple sexual partners has been consistently identified as a significant risk for acquiring sexually transmitted infections such as HIV, syphilis, chlamydia, and HPV. Because HPV is a sexually transmitted virus, the likelihood of exposure increases proportionally with the number of sexual partners. Yeah, this is true. But you can also mitigate these risks through quality sex education and making contraceptives easily available. If you are using condoms, if you are regularly getting tested and asking to see the results of any sexual partner's tests before you engage in sexual activity with them, then you can reduce your chance of catching an STI. The number of partners may be correlated with an increased risk of STI, but it's not the cause of an increased risk of but it's not the cause of you getting an STI. The cause of getting an STI is risky or irresponsible sexual behavior. And sure, there may be a correlation between people having more sexual partners and engaging in more risky sexual behavior, but in that case, the answer isn't to tell people, well, don't have this many partners. It's to say, don't engage in risky sexual behavior. It's as simple as that. Teaching people that they need to use condoms, they need to get regular tests, they need to ask their partners to get tested and see the results of those tests. These are how you mitigate and reduce the risks of getting an STI. Your number of partners may be, if you have this many partners, you're more likely to do this. But again, that's a descriptive correlation, not a prescriptive one. The prescriptive is if you engage in these risky behaviors, you're more likely to get an STI. That's prescriptive. Does that make sense? The risky behavior is the cause of a chance of STIs, not the number of partners themselves. So if you have unprotected sex, so that's sex without a condom, without getting tested yourself, without having a partner getting tested, if you have risky unprotected sex with one partner, you are still at higher risk of catching an STI from them than if you have safe, responsible sex with 3, 5, 10, 20 partners. And even if you do have this one partner for life like Brett Cooper wants you to have, this does not mean that you are free of catching STIs. If your partner has had in the past or continues to engage in risky sexual behavior, then you might still be at risk. Even though you think you're doing everything right, if your partner isn't, and you don't know for sure whether they are or not, you can still be at risk. Other infections like HPV, they call it a sexually transmitted infection because it can be passed on sexually, but it can also be caught and passed on without any actual sexual contact. It can be passed on through just physical contact in general. Other issues, for example, crabs, again, this can be passed on sexually, but it also can be passed on just through other contact. For example, if you share clothes with someone who has crabs, then you can catch crabs off them, kind of like head lice, So this idea that if you do this one thing and you're monogamous and you do this and this and this, you will never get an STI is untrue. There's still always a risk. Having one sexual partner does not make you immune to health problems. And also we have to think about, there are, and it's sad to say, there's a chance that people may end up being raped and catching a STI that way. I think in general, the demonization of STIs is a really, really bad thing. And this is something that I very briefly touched on in my Hunting Adeline video. But how do I work? This isn't in my script. I'm going off script here now. This demonization that you can't have multiple sexual partners because you will get an STI and then this is terrible and it demonizes STIs in general and makes them out to be dirty. It implies that the people who get them are dirty or wrong or immoral in some way, and that's just not true. An STI, like any other kind of infection, is just a health problem. And there are certain ways we can catch it just as there are certain ways we can catch other infections. You don't blame someone if they go sit on a busy train and come back with a cold, do you? And I'm snuffly and sniffly right now from being down in London last weekend. But you're not going to blame me and tell me I'm dirty and irresponsible because, you chose to leave the house. You chose to open yourself up to that risk of infection. If you don't want to get that cold, don't don't leave the house, don't go on a trip. You know what I mean? No one's going to say that. Yet we demonize STIs in a different way because they are inherently tied to our ideas around sexual morality and mostly shaming and policing women for having a sexual identity of their own, you know? STIs, like anything else, are health issues that need treatment. And it's as simple as that. Most of them are treatable or manageable. They're not anything bad or dirty or wrong. They're just a normal part of life. Some people will have STIs, some people won't. As long as you are safe and you're regularly getting checked, you're regularly going for treatment if you need it, that is all we can ask of you. There is, it doesn't reflect on your character or your morals if you have any kind of health issue like that. It's not a problem. It's not a big deal. It's not something bad. It's a thing that people just deal with. Anyway, sorry, I don't know if that made sense. I was a little bit off script there. What were you talking about? Pros and cons. Yeah, so, yes, when you have any sexual partner, health problems like that are a risk. That's fine. And you have to weigh up whether you want to open yourself up to those risks when you engage in a sexual relationship with anyone, right? That's fine. You have your pros, you have your cons, you figure it out, you decide if it's worth the risk to you. But it's the same in monogamous relationships as well, Having one partner for life, for example, can have its benefits for some people and it can have its cons for others. For example, if you feel you need to stick with them throughout anything else and you don't feel like you have that option to leave, that comes with its own dangers. It might mean that people feel unable to leave a physically or emotionally abusive relationship. Some people who feel they have to stick with the first partner they've ever had report levels of lower sexual satisfaction. Some people report higher levels of mental health issues like depression and so on. Again, not everyone, just like not everyone with multiple partners will have STIs. It's just these are risks that you open yourself up to when you choose a certain kind of relationship. And again, it's up to the individual to weigh these all up and say, well, yep, stats say this and show this and this, but what about me? What am I doing to keep myself safe? What do I know about my partner and their personality, their health, their history, their this? And you weigh it up and you say, well, here are the pros and here are the cons, and this is what I want, therefore I'm going to choose X. It's as simple as that. There's no one safe way to do relationships, Everything comes with risks and rewards, and it should be up to the individual to figure out what is the right way for them. And you know what? Sometimes they go into something and they realize, actually, this isn't the right way for me. I thought it was. I weighed everything up. I made my choice and it's not right. And they should absolutely be able to change their mind and try something else. The UV article, though, then gets more ridiculous by saying, further evidence supports the connection between partner count and adverse health outcomes. A cross-sectional study of adults aged 50 and older in England revealed that those who reported 10 or more lifetime sexual partners had significantly higher odds of having been diagnosed with cancer compared to those who had one or no sexual partners, approximately 1.19 times higher for women and 1.69 times higher for men. The same study found that women with 10 or more partners were more likely to report a limiting long-term illness with an odds ratio of 1.64. Similarly, commentary in the BMJ, Sexual and Reproductive Health, highlighted that a high number of sexual partners was linked to an increased risk in chronic disease overall, further emphasizing the long-term physical health implications of multiple sexual partners. So because of a handful of these studies showed a correlation, the author is like, see, there is a causal link, but that's not how any of this works. I read these studies and nowhere does it say, oh, if you have X number of partners or above, you will get cancer. This does cause cancer. Nowhere does it say that. Instead, one paper highlighted those with a higher number of sexual partners were more likely to report smoking, frequent alcohol intake, and engaging in physical activity on a weekly basis. So the people more likely to have a higher number of sexual partners were also likely to do things like smoke or do exercise. Does that mean that the more partners you have, the more exercise you do, and more partners cause you to exercise more? No. It means there's a correlation between the two, so people more likely to do X are also more likely to do Y. This is a correlation but not a causal link. And some of these activities like smoking are more likely to cause health issues, for example. So while there might be a correlation between number of partners and smoking, the causal link is between smoking and, for example, lung cancer. So you might be able to say there's a correlation between number of partners and lung cancer, but that's not causal. It's not the number of partners that's causing the lung cancer. It's the smoking that's causing the... Do you understand what I mean? Correlation and causation are sometimes linked, but they are different and separate. Just as this study shows, there's a correlation between people more likely to have a higher number of sexual partners and do a lot more physical activity and exercise, right? Higher levels of physical activity and exercise lead to things like healthier hearts, for example, as you age. So if we're using the same logic as the writers of this Evie article, then the higher number of sexual partners you have, the healthier your heart is going to be. Except it doesn't work like that, does it? Because there's a correlation, but it's not causation. And of course, they wouldn't use that one because it doesn't fit their agenda.
Okay, editing me popping in to say, if you're still not convinced by this, there is a whole website called Spurious Correlations, which is dedicated to showing that... Yeah, Grumbles. Dedicated to showing that there can be ridiculous and, uncanny correlations between bits of data that aren't actually connected. They aren't causal links. So the top one on here at the minute is there is a correlation between Google searches for Batman and the number of security guards in Oklahoma. There is a very, very close correlation between the popularity of the first name Franklin and the season rating of 2.5 Men. So correlations can happen without it being a causal link. And I think this is very, very important to remember. If you want to check out this website, it's really fun. I will leave it linked in the source document as well. But now, you've got a lot to say, don't you, baby? You say hi to people. Oh, there's my baby there. And you got a bit of kind of monster there as well. Oh, sleepy girl. It's cold today, so I'd wrap her in a blanket. Although she's just picked it off, so we'll see how it goes.
One paper literally ends by saying, more research is necessary to determine whether a causal relationship exists, while the other ends with, inquiring about the number of sexual partners a patient has had may be a simple and cost-effective complement to existing cancer screening programs in identifying those at risk of certain cancers, although further work is required first in order to replicate our findings and establish whether a causal relationship exists. And that's another thing. These studies weren't done to shame people and say you shouldn't have X number of sexual partners. They were done to say, is there a really easy way we can just screen out people who might be more at risk of cancer so we can target them to do testing and help their health early? And yet, people like the writers at Evie have been like, oh, well, actually, we can use this to shame people and tell them we need to do this, this, and this and police their sexual behaviour. And it's really messed up. It's kind of like a weaponization of science, you know? And the other thing to note is that, and this isn't in my script, I've literally just realised it now as I'm reading this again. The main study here that they're looking at was done on a cross-section of adults aged 50 and older in England. Now, adults aged 50 and older in England in the past did not have good sex education. They did not have access to the things that people like I had when I was a teenager, you know? We were given out things like free condoms when we needed them. We had free STI checkups regularly up to the age of like 25. And a lot, well, actually, that was just in certain clinics. Here in the UK, I can still go and get a free STI test anytime I want from my local GP. It's not an issue. And they give out free condoms as well. Last time I came back with a bag of 20. It was great. So contraceptives are still cheap and sometimes free and easily available in the UK, right? STI testing is now cheap and free and easily available in the UK, especially to young people. Our sex education is now it's not perfect, it still needs improvement in places, but it's getting better. For these people who are age 50 and older, they had none of that when they were young. This was not a thing. Therefore, of course, it's not surprising that older people who had more sexual partners were more at risk of health problems and STIs and other things associated with it because they didn't have the educational resources they need to mitigate the risks. I'm not sure we would see the same correlation with young people today when they get older. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if it made sense there. This is why I script, because otherwise my thoughts are jumbled. But I hope that makes sense. I think in summary, it's very simple. If you want to have a bunch of sexual partners, you go for it, that's fine. Just be safe and healthy and look after yourself and your partner or partners. If you don't, then don't do it. It's not that difficult. You don't want to have multiple partners? Don't have multiple partners. That's fine. Move on. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. Let's get back to Brett, who she tries to be positive here. She says that she thinks the tides are changing and that there's starting to be a push away from encouraging everyone to be a dirty, dirty whore.
I promise you, it does feel like things are starting to change.
And her evidence? Well, pop stars are getting married, and that's never, ever, 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 ever happened before. Taylor Swift is engaged. Charlie XCX got married. shocking. No famous woman has ever got married for the last 30 years. Come on. It's ridiculous. Women have always got married and celebrated their relationships, and some women haven't. This is absolutely fine. Like, do you not remember the whole thing from between, like, what, the 2000s and actually probably still to today, where, like, famous women would sell their engagement photos to magazines and their wedding photos and things like this because it was a big deal and they could make money out of this and it was celebrated and people were interested in seeing their relationships. This has always happened. Once again, like, it's good to have people to look up to, like celebrities, who are in all kinds of relationships and have all kinds of lifestyles. Married women, women with tons of babies, single women, women with multiple partners, child-free women, and everyone in between. I think asexual women as well. We don't necessarily have as much representation for some of those, I guess, how do I say minorities? But, you know, like the more unique circumstances that aren't quite mainstream. I think we don't really have as much celebrity representation for them, but we have some, and I think it's important that we have all of this representation. I think it's good to see everyone, because then everyone has someone they can look up to a bit, you know? I still feel like my brain is so foggy. I hope I'm making sense.
Getting engaged very publicly, saying that I'm so excited to be married, writing songs about it, after they have been pining for this kind of relationship for a majority of their careers.
I mean, I feel like this might just be referring to Taylor Swift, but yeah, and good for her, she's getting what she wants. I just find it so confusing that Brett is praising this and being like, yeah, this is great, you shout about your marriage in front of other women and young kids, and you encourage them to do the same. But the moment a singer or a celebrity or someone says, no, I'm happy being single, or, nah, yeah, I have numerous relationships, it's great, or even just like, no, I've decided I don't ever want kids, then suddenly Brett is... and other conservative women are calling them out and saying that they're, you know, indoctrinating kids and spreading evil and you've got the devil inside you, all that stuff. A woman saying, I want to get married and then getting married is a good thing, but somehow a woman behaving in the exact same way but saying, nah, I don't fancy getting married, don't fancy having kids, is somehow child-corrupting evil propaganda. It doesn't make sense. It is ridiculous.
Now, another example of how things are changing are the fact that shows like Sex and the City and Girls that were almost grotesque in their portrayal of casual sex and dysfunctional, unhealthy romantic relationships have majorly declined in popularity. Like, I was doing some research this morning, I do not know of another show right now that is currently airing that is very popular that resembles either of those two shows in the slightest. Whereas women today are watching shows like Nobody Wants This, which is about fighting for love, fighting for a committed relationship across cultural and religious lines, or, probably the best example, are shows like The Summer I Turned Pretty, which is a sweet, gushy YA TV show. And these adult women are watching the show. They're waiting with bated breath to figure out how a youthful teenage love triangle turns out.
Yeah, but shows like this have always existed, even when Sex and the City was on the air, even when Girls was airing. Just as shows about other kinds of lifestyles and relationships continue to exist. The cherry picking from Brett is... I can't cope with it. I can't. Let's look at some examples. Wanderlust was the show about an open marriage. 2020's Trigonometry was about a throuple. Even just last year in 2024, one of the most popular films of the years was Challengers, which was about a kind of non-traditional relationship and a sort of not quite but almost throuple situation. Sex Education only finished, I think it was last year, and that was about all different kinds of sexual and non-sexual relationships between people. We had asexual representation, we had all sorts, it was great. Right now, the latest season of Euphoria is being made where, let's be honest, everyone is kind of sleeping with everyone. Well, it's not quite like Skins was, but you know what I mean, there's a lot of, let's call it adventurous sexual behaviour on there. And on the opposite end too, even when Sex and the City was on air, for example, so let's look at its original run in the, late 90s, early 2000s, where Brett claims everyone was so anti-monogamy and love stories were and like love stories were disgusting and the devil and you'd never see them. Like, no, actually during that time we got some of the most iconic rom-coms and just romantic films in general of all time. Notting Hill, 10 Things I Hate About You, Serendipity, You've Got Mail, all came out while Sex and the City was airing. Like, they're all pushing this narrative that you need to find the one and find true love and settle down, and that is the key to your happiness. There's no consistency to Brett's arguments. It's like she wants to be like, oh, at this point there was this, and at this point there's this, and blah, blah, blah. So she just cherry picks media from these points and tries to claim that all media was like this, and she's missing out on so much, and she's missing out on the nuance.
Why almost every woman you know is obsessed with the summer I turned pretty. And the reasons probably won't surprise you. Because they are natural, because they are normal, because they are almost biological in nature. I shouldn't say almost biological, they are biological in nature.
She goes on to claim that women are turning back to hetero-monogamous rom-coms because they are natural, normal, biological things for women to want. Which is absolutely true of some women, but not all women. And that's why I think it's great that we have a variety of TV programs and films and media which show what is natural, normal, and biological for other people. People have loved seeing media which portrays people of different sexualities and different sexual behaviours and different identities. More shows than ever show how natural and normal it is. To use Brett's words, natural and normal and biological. They show how that is normal to be queer or asexual or trans. They show that this is normal and natural for so many people because it is. And it has appeal to people because it's natural and normal to them. It's good to see people like yourself on TV. And if we're talking about mainstream programs that have as much appeal and hype around them as what Brett likes, which is The Summer I Turned Pretty, disclaimer, I've not seen it, so I can't comment on it, but I know it's got a lot of mainstream appeal. I know there's a lot of hype. Other TV that's had that same hype and mainstream appeal that contains queer characters and so on, you've got one of the main characters in Schitt's Creek was pansexual, Sex Education and Heartstopper. They were both huge, and they have massive queer representation, asexual representation, all sorts. And that's just scratching the surface. It's important to show that all these variations are just as natural and normal as monogamy and heterosexuality is, because they are. And when people ask for more queer representation, or, for example, to show more single people on TV, or to show more child-free people on TV, for example, it's not asking for hetero-monogamous couples with children to be erased. It's just asking for fair representation of everyone. And I don't think Brett understands that. She's very all or nothing. But I can't remember who said it, but there's a quote I always come back to in my videos, which is something like, when you're so used to being on top, equality starts to feel like oppression. And I feel like that's what Brett's experiencing. Suddenly, because, she's not seeing people like her in 100% of places, and now maybe it's only 50% of places. Suddenly she's like, oh my God, I'm being oppressed. It's, no, you're not. Now you're just experiencing equality. Oppression was when queer people or asexual people or single people didn't see themselves represented in a positive light on TV. That's oppression. Being told you're abnormal, that's oppression. Having to share the screen with other people and have people say this is all normal and healthy is not oppression.
I mean, can you imagine how shocking this is? Is this a surprise to anyone that women still dream of happily ever after and love?
No, it's not surprising at all. Plenty of people want this, as feminists, for example, have always said. I just think it's important that, and I say this as a feminist, that we show that love and happily ever after looks different for different people. Half of Brett's video is then just ads for blankets and debt. So that's, debt consolidation or debt management, I don't know, something. I skipped it. A lot of ads in there for such a short video though. And then she goes on about how rom-coms are making a comeback, which, yeah, is true. I do think they kind of there was a lull for a while where they weren't as popular, but I think it's more nuanced than Brett says. Certain rom-coms have always remained popular and have always been made at the same steady rate. For example, the typical innocent, purity-focused Hallmark romance films, where, the love interests don't even kiss until the last minute of the film, and even then it's not always shown on screen. And they've always been around. They absolutely have. And they've never really gone away. They've maintained their steady popularity throughout the years. And I have to admit, even I have a soft spot for those romance films sometimes. When I'm feeling down and I just need something mindless on in the background, I will sometimes put on a Hallmark rom-com, even though they all have the same story, they all have the same characters, the same thing happens in each of them, and the settings are so unrealistic and no one understands how any of these jobs or industries that they put them in work. There's something quite comforting about them. That's my guilty pleasure, I'll tell you that. But if we want to talk about, yeah, the more mainstream kind of typical rom-com that dominated the cinema in the early 2000s, even into the early 2010s, there was a bit of a lull for a while from about maybe 2015 onwards into the early 2020s where we didn't see as many rom-coms in the cinema. There were a few still, but they weren't that big. And they have kind of started to come back a little bit and be a little bit bigger and have bigger budgets and be taken a bit more seriously. But the thing is, like, what's really nice is that a lot of these films with a romantic storyline and romantic leads and the focus is on the relationship and the romance, turns out they are just more diverse than they've ever been, and that's fantastic. You have films like Challengers that I mentioned earlier, focusing on relationships that are a lot more complex than just boy meets girl, they get together, the end. You have films like Red, White and Royal Blue focusing on gay relationships. Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which focuses on male sex work and an older woman's sexual desires and appetite. You know, these are films with the relationship between the characters at the core, and these are mainstream films that were put on in the cinema and had massive appeal, but they're more diverse than just boy meets girl, married, have babies. Even your more traditional boy meets girl films, though, they still exist, and again, they're getting a lot more budget now, but they're also more complex. So you have films like Irish Wish with Lindsay Lohan, where the protagonist is chasing after this one man and she thinks he's her true love, but it ends up being the wrong relationship for her, and she ends up falling in love with someone else. So this can be representative of a woman who chases after someone and then realizes they're wrong and goes after someone else, and she has this complex dating history before finding the one, you know? Other examples would be like Sydney Sweeney's Anyone But You, which opens with casual sex, and you get a full-on explicit sex scene in the middle of the film. And then there's complexities to it, but ultimately it is boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get together, boom. That's your typical rom-com, but it's not focused on this whole, like, purity culture pushing, saving yourself till marriage narrative. So I think, yeah, rom-coms are having a resurgence, and romantic films in general are having a resurgence, but it's a lot more diverse than it used to be, and this is only a good thing. Anyway, she then decides to bring it all back to that post in the beginning about the woman not wanting one partner for life, and she says this:
I actually did not see a single person after 20 million impressions echoing or supporting what that girl said. In fact, most of them were actually just making fun of her.
Yeah, it's almost like on a conservative platform like Twitter, the majority of people will have conservative values. How wild. How shocking. But again, I don't see Brett's point here. Surely again, this just shows that different people want different things, and that's more than okay. I don't see a problem with this.
One comment read, why would I want to have sex with different people? That's effing gross. Another person basically used her same meme format and said, y'all really want to avoid committing yourself to one person to instead have sex with dozens of strangers till you're like 40 and then be all alone and miserable for the rest of your life? Yeah, ooh, that's gross. You might think settling down and being in love and having somebody commit to you is disgusting, but I would make the same Gossip Girl Leighton Meester face at you hooking up with random people until you are old and they move on to people who are younger. Like, sorry, that genuinely is gross. That is genuinely how I feel.
Yeah, look, if you think it's gross, just don't do it. There's no need to shame other people for it, though, is there? Simple as that. I think eating sweet corn is gross and disgusting, and even the thought of it makes me want to vomit. And if I smell sweet corn near me, I'm like, start gagging. It's disgusting. But I'm not going to make a 20-minute video telling people they should feel ashamed for eating sweet corn, calling them names for it, and trying to get the law changed so sweet corn is no longer served in the UK, am I? Although actually, maybe I should do that. Down with sweet corn. If anyone would like to join my anti-sweet corn protest, please leave me a comment below and I'll let you know the dates of the protest. We will all be making signs. Down with corn is a great one. Corn kills is another. I lost my husband to corn. That's going to be on there. And as for that last comment, it's just ignorant, isn't it? Being alone doesn't mean lonely. Plenty of people find love after 40, and just because you've had X number of sexual partners in the past, that doesn't stop you from wanting a long-term partner at some point, or being able to find a long-term partner at some point. It's really funny because I get so many men shaming me online, being like, oh, you know, they call me like, and I've never disclosed anything like, any specifics about my sexual history or past, because that's my business. It's absolutely no one's business but my own. And yet, people still make assumptions about me, and a lot of men send me comments calling me like a whore, a slut, a slag, blah 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 blah. Hoe is a big one. I get hoe quite a lot. And the thing is, like, it doesn't really bother me because they're never words I would use to describe myself. I am very comfortable with the choices I've made in regards to my sexuality, and I don't think anyone who has any number of sexual partners is a slag or a slut or a whore or a hoe or whatever, you know what I mean? So I just feel like them using those words to describe me says more about them than it does about me. So it doesn't really bother me at this point. But the point I was going to make is, I get so many of these men telling me that, like, oh, they wouldn't ever want to date me. I'm like, that's fine. If you're calling me a whore, I don't want to date you either. You know, that's absolutely fine. I don't want to date anyone who uses those words about women. I've told you before, I walked out on a date with a man because one of the first things he said to me was calling his stepsisters massive slags. And I was like, can you not? Like, I stayed for about an hour because I was like, you know what, maybe he's just being edgy and nervous. He wasn't. He only got more misogynistic, so I left. God, I'm getting so sidetracked. This is what happens when I don't script. I just go off on tangents and tell stupid stories that make no sense. What I was going to say, though, was, all these men are like, no man will ever want you, you're a whore, blah, 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 men never want whores, men don't want this and this and this. And I'm like, well, it's never been a detriment to me in the past. Like, in the real world, I have been on dates with a lot of men who, they don't even ask about your sexual history, they don't care about your number of partners, they just want to know, are you single now? Are you seeing anyone else? And when I'm like, yes, I'm single, no, I'm not, that's all that matters. You know what I mean? Like, I'm dating a very, very wonderful man at the minute who's lovely, and that's never come up for either of us. It's never been an issue. I think we're both aware that the other has a past, but it's in the past. It doesn't affect the here and now. We're both very clear about what we want now, what we're looking for now, the fact we're not dating other people now, and that's all that matters. So I think in the real world, the majority of good men who are themselves feminists and secure in themselves, and they care about other people, and they actually bother to, like, understand other people and care about them and listen to them, they don't really care about this sort of thing. So this idea that if you have X number of partners, you'll never, ever, ever find anyone is a load of nonsense. Sure, that might exclude some people from, like, you know, your potential partners, but surely, like, that's a good thing because it means that their values and yours don't match and you wouldn't be suitable anyway. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, the whole thing from Brett here, her attitude here, her quoting these people, I found that quite gross. I found Brett's remarks really gross. Her attitude was really gross. Like, it wasn't nice. It's like, she's here calling other people gross. I'm like, you're the gross one. Like, it's really, really mean and unnecessary and cruel and quite childish on her part, I think. Seeing a harmless joke online and your response being, I'm going to personally attack and insult the woman who said this, is just really immature and it's really mean for no good reason. And I think that the people who were sending these tweets as replies, I think that Brett saying this in response, they just need to take a step back and think about what they've said and be like, well, why am I being so cruel? And what does this actually say about me and reflect on me and my feelings? Because you calling names to this woman for making a joke, again, says more about you than her, you know? I'm also confused about the people you sleep with will move on to someone younger thing. Because, one, I don't really think this, again, yes, there's some gross people out there who, like, are all like, ooh, peak womanhood is like 15-year-old children, and they're gross. We'll talk about them in a second. But for the average person, does Brett not realise that the people you're attracted to, for the average person, matures and ages as you do, right? So think about when you were like a teenager, and you were like, you saw other teenagers, you were like, oh my god, they're so hot, I got such a big crush. And now as an adult, you might look back on those old photos and be like, oh god, they were a child. What was I thinking back then? Because you're no longer attracted to teenagers because you're an adult. As you get in your 20s, you're attracted to other people in your 20s. As you're in your 30s, you're attracted to other people in your 30s. And obviously there's, you know, it's not just like, oh, I'm only attracted to other 32-year-olds. It's more wide and complex than that. But generally, the people we're attracted to, the age ranges of that increase as we get older. What we're attracted to gets older as we get older. That's what I'm trying to say. 2, let's not normalize 40-something men creeping on 20-somethings, please. Let's not stop it. This idea that if you're 40, your 40-year-old partner will dump you for a 20-year-old is them being gross and creepy. That's not a fault with you. And 3, why do these women seem to think that men only ever want considerably younger women? Like, have they ever met a normal, non-creepy man? And even if you are just looking for something casual and not like a long-term relationship, right? Why would you consistently go for someone so much younger and more immature and naive than you, unless you're a predator who just wants to take advantage of that? I don't get it. Okay, I was rambly there. But anyway, what does any of this have to do with the title of the video or that initial statement that Brett made in the beginning? Well, let's find out.
And that comment right there brings us to a completely different conversation that is currently happening on X, and that is the one about postpartum women. Now, that debate that is happening on X right now is about whether women are actually attractive postpartum, if that means that their husbands will cheat on them and leave them postpartum, and how this makes childless women think about having kids. Because a lot of women, are not interested in having children, and a big reason why is because they do not want their bodies to change. They don't want their romantic relationships to change. Now, this whole debate started with these two posts. This woman said, I've had multiple women in New York City tell me that they don't want to get pregnant because they're afraid of what it will do to their body. And RFH doctor said that is because men are disgusted by postpartum bodies.
Okay, well, let's just remember, this is coming from the woman who just a few seconds ago implied that all men are just waiting to trade you in for a younger model at the first chance they get. Does she not realize that there's more than one reason to not want to have kids? That's a question. I don't want kids because I don't like kids. I don't like being around them. I don't want to be around them. I don't want to spend time with them. I hate that baby and toddler smell. That turns my stomach nearly as bad as corn does. Carrying a pregnancy to term would likely kill me with all my uterus and cervix issues. I don't want my body to change because I don't want my organs to get squished and moved around. I don't want the health problems that potentially come with pregnancy. And again, mostly I just don't want kids in my life, and so on. I feel like when women say they're afraid of what will happen to their bodies, it's not about, in general, oh no, this man won't find me attractive anymore, or oh no, men won't find me attractive anymore. It's more about, oh my god, are my hair and teeth gonna fall out? Will I end up with diabetes or high blood pressure? Will I ever be able to sneeze without peeing myself again? How much are my vagina and vulva gonna tear and rip open as I give birth? Am I going to end up with a prolapsed uterus? How much am I going to end up with scarred, stretched, and sagging skin in places? Will I even recognize myself after birth? It's rarely about, oh no, but what will men think of me? It's about women caring about their bodies, their health, and the way they identify themselves.
When I was going through the quote tweets of this post, when I was scrolling through the comment section, as I do, it was the women who were agreeing with this. They were crapping on men, and they were also saying that they were the ones who found postpartum bodies scary or unattractive, and it was the men that were denying it. Now, for a lot of you, this probably is not shocking in the slightest, especially if you are a woman, if you have been around groups of women, if you understand gender relations, how women treat themselves or others, because women are our own harshest critics. That is something I have actually talked about a lot because many feminists like to point the finger at men and say, you've done this to me, you made me have to be skinny, you did all of this, when actually, it's other women. Women are the ones who pressure other women to go get plastic surgery, who make them feel insecure, who say that you need to be skinny or look a certain way. 9 times out of 10, it is women who are doing that and not men.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Right. Well, she's right and she's wrong. Are women harsh on themselves? Often yes. Are women sometimes judgmental of other women? Often yes. But are men also judgmental towards women? Often yes. The comments I get on my videos calling me ugly, saying I have bad teeth, I have too prominent of an Adam's apple, that's a huge one I get quite a lot, that I'm too fat, that I'm too skinny, that I need to dye the roots of my hair, that I have a stupid nose, blah, 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 blah. 99% of the time they come from men. The judgments on my appearance come from men, not women. However, I realise I'm just one example. I do also see women putting down other women online, and that I don't think is okay. I do see women comparing themselves to others online and thinking that they need to wear this or get a certain product or use a certain product or get a certain type of plastic surgery or treatment or whatever because they've seen other women do it and now they want to do it themselves. Yes, I absolutely see that too. I've been guilty of doing it myself too, 100%. I do think it's a really complex issue, and I think what a lot of feminist writers have said over the years is that it's not just like every single individual man who is responsible for this, but it's the result of living in a patriarchal society and the power structures in place where women have been forced to feel like they have to look and act a certain way, and they definitely have some internalized misogyny because of that in regards to both themselves and other women. And I think, again, what a lot of feminist writers have said is that a lot of these harmful ideas over the years have been upheld and forced upon us primarily, but not exclusively, by men in positions of power and influence. One article from the New Feminist website summarizes that while so many of our notions of beauty today are internalized and expressed by women, they come from societal power structures which are inherently misogynistic and often racist too. So the article writes, "We cannot ignore that patriarchal and capitalist values infiltrate the beauty industry to oppress women. Marxist feminists have pointed out how women are exploited economically by the high-profiting beauty world, while intersectional feminists highlight the ways in which certain demographics are excluded or disproportionately affected by the industry. It's also true that beauty standards have been and continue to be sold to women as a way of catering to the male gaze, where what is considered to be beauty has been historically shaped by what heterosexual white men have desired. Shocker. Social media certainly hasn't helped, with young girls growing up idealizing Insta gurus whose bodies are only attainable after plastic surgery or Photoshop. Though, of course, it is not a bad thing for women to want to change their bodies, we must ask ourselves where the idea of an ideal feminine standard comes from." The article goes on to say, while women have the choice to engage in beauty practices or not, we cannot ignore the Western Eurocentric standards reflected in beauty standards. We cannot ignore how women of colour are told to look a certain way, and then for characteristics they have been stereotyped to be adopted by white women for a trend, or that they are consistently excluded from the whitewashed industry. Meanwhile, in her book, Disobedient Bodies, Emma Dabiri writes, "We need to recognise that the attention focused on our bodies, particularly female bodies, is accompanied by a deeply entrenched contempt for them, and that this is the result of specific cultural, philosophical, and religious legacies. As well as a healthy dose of body hatred and misogyny, Western culture has in many ways been determined by a heavily visual paradigm, which has also helped inform the shallowness of the beauty regime." So it's absolutely not just that all feminists say this is the fault of men, and it's not. And it's not, as Brett will want you to think, down to silly little women blaming everyone but themselves and they just need to take some personal responsibility. It's a lot more complex than that. I just think there's a whole lot of contradictions and confusion in what Brett says. Like, listen to this, right? So she has this odd rant about how it's only feminists who think men hate women's postpartum bodies. And then she says this.
Having children changes your body. It is one of the many sacrifices that women make when they choose to have a baby. Now, does that mean that you are automatically unattractive forever? No, that is ridiculous. I mean, there was a whole other viral post just 2 weeks ago. I'm telling you, there has been a lot orbiting about postpartum attractiveness right now. But there was another viral post where Benny Johnson's wife posted about loving her postpartum body, about how she's worked so hard to get back in shape, she feels great, and she was saying that, you know, having kids does not have to destroy you. She said, "I'm 36 weeks postpartum, I've had 4 babies in 4 years. Don't believe the lies that having kids destroys you."
So I kind of loved this at first, because I was like, hell yeah, let's celebrate natural bodies with extra weight and loose skin and stretch marks. Let's see all the beauty in that and celebrate a body that is so powerful and healthy and strong, right? But no, no. He ruins it all by still upholding these traditional white Eurocentric beauty standards that only skinny white women with flat tummies are beautiful. She's not saying you're beautiful postpartum as you are. She's saying you can be beautiful postpartum if you work for it and get yourself skinny again like this woman. And this is actually a massive part of the problem in shaming women for having natural, normal bodies.
But she's absolutely correct. And while our culture today seems to want to reject exceptionalism and health in favor of relatability and enablement, especially when it comes to content, especially when it comes to women, seeing these types of stories is a net positive thing. And seeing this type of post for many women should be empowering and hopeful for you.
Hard disagree here. It's a complex issue with lots of facets. Now, I know Brett is too young to remember, but I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s when women's bodies were scrutinised relentlessly by traditional and new media outlets. Heroin chic was in, and every woman with even an ounce of fat on them was told they needed to lose weight. We were told that if you couldn't see every bone sticking out that we were too much. Me having a little bit of fat here on my arms, that would have been ripped apart by newspapers in the 90s. I would have been called a hippo, I'd have been called disgusting, I'd have been told, I need to stop eating and blah, 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 blah. Genuine. So, and this is a very normal, fairly skinny arm, and this would have been ripped apart in the 90s. I remember it all. In the book Toxic, Women, Fame and the Tabloid 2000s, Sarah Ditum writes that their, meaning women, and celebrity women in particular, their bodies, their images, their personal dramas were all dissected in minutest detail across tabloid magazines and gossip blogs. The stories of celebrity women, as told by the tabloid press and celebrity blogs, became vehicles through which we made sense of our own existence. For the public, tearing these women to pieces was both a social activity and a form of divination. In the entrails of their reputations, we hunted for clues about what a woman ought to be, and this has always been one of the functions of celebrity women. And growing up at that time, I know that I really internalized a lot of that stuff, and I was incredibly harsh on myself and other women, especially as a teenager, until I finally, I don't want to say like grew up and matured, but as I grew up and matured, I educated myself on these issues, and I learned to recognize this as a problem, and I had to actively work to undo the harm that this had kind of done both to myself and in my behavior towards other women. It was an active process I had to undo. Seeing nothing but super skinny white women was rooted in body shaming, misogyny, and racism, and it was incredibly harmful to every kind of woman, as eating disorders and substance abuse issues increased rapidly in the 90s and 2000s. It was everywhere. It was so damn common. Over the years, we have started to understand the harm this caused, and we're seeing more diverse women and bodies in general out there. And as Emma Dabiri writes, consider the images we see. Until the last 10 years or so, media casting was mind-bogglingly limited. When my kids watch TV shows from before they were born, they're confused why everybody is white. When I was younger, this was the default. Women, and certainly beautiful women, were white. They were thin, and everyone was straight. In the last few years, there's been a representational revolution. Across the media, thanks to pressures to change coming from social media, we now see all types of people, and in regards to women specifically, we see women with different body types, Indigenous women, Asian women, Latinx women, black women of all complexions with all hair textures. We see queer women and non-binary people and trans women, women with tattoos and unconventional forms of beauty. I think about how unrecognizable it is from the world I grew up in. And while this is a massive positive step forward, which is doing good and is helping women and other people, it's not perfect. Emma goes on to write, I wonder why with all these advances, so many young people and young women specifically seem to feel under so much more pressure when it comes to their appearance, not less. Social media has enabled body positive and diverse representation of people and bodies. It has created previously unimaginable opportunities for community and facilitated vast knowledge sharing. And of course, in concert with representation and diversity, social media has created beauty standards on speed. It has exacerbated competition and comparison, enabled our over-preoccupation with our appearances in the elusive pursuit of the endorphin rush and crash of likes, and the promise of concrete results for those deemed beautiful enough, as well as intensified body image disorders. But why has all the progress occurred simultaneously with such enhanced pressures? Are we witnessing the age-old reflexes that are triggered whenever there are developments that awaken women and marginalised people en masse to their power? And these are some damn fantastic points, and I can't help but feel like videos like this one from Brett and the post you mentioned are exacerbating that problem of people comparing themselves to others. Brett is making this video and saying these things under the guise of it being helpful to women and empowering. You know, hey, postpartum bodies are great, men love postpartum bodies, don't worry, which sounds helpful and similar to the things being said in the body positivity movement, until she switches things up by then slipping in the caveat of, hey, postpartum bodies are great, but only if you look a certain way and fit a certain beauty standard, and if you don't look like this, then it's because you're not working hard enough for it, and I'm not saying this to be mean, it's for your own health benefit. Brett and other women like her can't seem to understand that there's more ways to be healthy than just one, and healthy doesn't look the same on different people. Brett's video and opinion here is just misogynistic body shaming, specifically targeting new mums while they're in a vulnerable state. And she's saying it all under the guise of empowerment when it's no such thing, and that makes it extra dangerous.
Your body still might change. You might not look like Benny Johnson's wife. But does that mean that your husband will stop loving you or finding you attractive? I mean, we would hope not. And he is an asshole, if so. And again, this all goes back to the same conversation we were having at the top of the episode about commitment and why that is so important for pregnancy and motherhood and raising children.
She does kind of track this back a little bit and says things like this, but it doesn't feel enough. It doesn't feel good enough. It's too little too late. She's already made that point. She can't then be like, well, I guess it's okay, but you know. And I think the other thing to remember here is that, like, Commitment and legal contracts don't stop someone leaving you if they really want to. I don't like this idea that you have to get married to trap someone into not leaving you, whatever the circumstances. If you are with someone and you're like, in order to stop them leaving me if I put on weight, I need to marry them so they legally can't get away, that says to me that you don't really trust them or their commitment to you, you know? And the final thing to point out here, I think, is that, yeah, those men who do that and leave these women in those situations are horrific people, but this doesn't stop some of them doing it anyway. And I don't get why acknowledging that there are men who are like this is somehow the fault of women in any way, like Brett makes it out to be. This next part, I think, is the most dangerous and horrific thing she says in this entire video.
Now, something that pro-choicers like to say all the time is that consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy, which is completely false. It is a completely distorted view of reality. It's just completely ridiculous.
No, it's not. That is a fact. If I consent to sex, I am only consenting to one particular intimate moment with another person. I am not consenting to semen entering my uterus, or my vagina for that matter. I'm not consenting to someone's sperm fertilizing my eggs. I'm not consenting to a blastocyst implanting in my uterine lining. I'm not consenting to a fetus growing inside my body for the next 9 months and using me as its source of nutrients. Just like if I consent to vaginal sex, I'm not automatically consenting to oral or anal sex. I have to consent to those things separately. And it's not just sexual things. If I consent to allowing a person to feed me a chocolate, for example, I'm not consenting to allowing them to shove a hot dog down my throat until I choke. Consent for different acts needs to be given separately, just as with anything. If I consent to allowing a person to come into my home, I'm not consenting to allowing them to throw paint on the walls. And I think for many of us women who aren't consenting to pregnancy, we take steps to show that we're not consenting. For me personally, I take precautions by using condoms, for example. For me, well, I can't use other contraception because of my uterus issues at the minute, and there's a whole drama there. But for a lot of women, they will not consent to pregnancy by saying, you know, I'm taking the pill, I've got an IUD, I've got the implant, I've got all sorts. These are ways that women use to say, no, I'm not consenting to this. But another way we don't consent is by saying, no, I'm not consenting to this. It's as simple as that. That's all that needs to be said. A woman saying, I don't want to be pregnant, means she is not consenting to pregnancy, whether she has sex with someone or not. It is as simple as that. And let's talk about things like tampering with birth control, right? Because if a person tampers with your birth control, or pokes a hole in a condom, for example, or slips off a condom without you realizing it, that is sexual assault, because you have not consented to the risk of pregnancy in any way. You consented to sex with the caveats that you would use this birth control, you would use this method, and you would not risk pregnancy. If they ignore that, then you are no longer consenting to that sexual activity because those caveats are gone. And this is recognised as the law in a number of countries. So in the UK, for example, under the Serious Crime Act of 2015, it is a criminal offence to control someone else's access to contraception, force or manipulate pregnancy or termination decisions, or isolate a person from healthcare, access of reproductive choices. As of 2022, removing a condom without consent or damaging it is classed as rape and will be charged as rape. Morally and legally, consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy and never will be. And that's why, if you mess with someone's birth control, that counts as rape. And if you cannot separate a sexual act and, a desire for intimacy with someone with pregnancy, then maybe there's something wrong with you and you need to have a think about why that is. It's funny that Brett is the one who wants to make sex meaningful again and special by making it only for married couples and saying that it's sacred and it brings people together, and yet she can't separate it from pregnancy. I guess in that case, any woman past menopause should stop having sex, right? Because, it's inherently tied to pregnancy, and if you can't get pregnant, then it's not real sex. And any infertile people should stop having sex, right? Never again. Unless you want to acknowledge that sex has more purposes than just getting pregnant. And if you want to acknowledge that it can have those other purposes, it can be fun, it can be intimate, it can be fulfilling in other ways. But if you acknowledge that, then you also acknowledge that it is separate from pregnancy. And if it's separate from pregnancy, then you need to consent to each act separately. Does this make sense?
Because when you have sex, no matter how careful you are being, no matter what birth control forms you are using, you are opening the door for pregnancy.
This is just such a narrow-minded view of sex. Like, what about sex without vaginal penetration? What about sex between people of the same gender or with the same genitals? I'm pretty sure that when two cis women have sex, they're not opening the door to pregnancy, are they? I'm pretty sure if you just have oral sex with someone, you're not opening the door to pregnancy, are you? Why don't these other types of sexual encounter count as sex to Brett? Why? Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's such a misogynistic view, because in her mind, sex only counts as sex if a penis ejaculates into a vagina. It is a male-focused idea of what sex is. The women's orgasms and experience don't even come into this. It's all centered purely around the male orgasm and putting semen in a vagina. That is all she can seem to think sex is. You know, that is the culmination of sex in her mind, and that's why she can't separate sex and pregnancy. But if you understand that sex is so much more than just a penis ejaculating, and that it can be so many more experiences, then you realize that sex and pregnancy are very, very separate. And sex does not mean you risk getting pregnant, because there are other ways to have that physical intimacy without the risk of pregnancy. And therefore, if you're consenting to sex, you are not consenting to pregnancy. It is that simple. And let's say you are having sex with, as a cis woman, you are having sex with a cis man, for example, and there is that risk of pregnancy. Just because there is a risk, and you acknowledge that is a risk, that does not mean you are consenting to it happening to you and shouldn't be able to have healthcare and shouldn't be able to have access to healthcare to manage it if it does happen. Yeah? If I cross a road, I know there's a risk of me being hit by a car, but that does not mean I am consenting to being hit by a car. And that does not mean if I get hit by a car, I'm not allowed to go to hospital and get my broken leg treated or whatever, you know? Same thing with pregnancy. If I eat a burger, there's a risk that I could get food poisoning. This does not mean that I am consenting to food poisoning. And if I do get food poisoning, this does not mean I should be denied healthcare because, well, you knew the risks when you went in there, you just got to deal with it yourself. This to me says that Brett, one, doesn't really understand how wide of a spectrum and how beautiful and wonderful and fulfilling sex can really be. And it also says to me that she doesn't really understand what consent is or how it works. And that is very, very concerning. Again, I know she's young, but she's still an adult woman, and I think a basic understanding of what consent is something that every adult needs. And I would really suggest she goes back and gets some basic sex education.
And so as a woman, I mean, both men and women, but especially as a woman, you better be damn sure about the man that you are sleeping with.
This really bothered me because this statement is majorly verging into victim blaming. You know, it's interesting because this is something that I've been talking about and thinking about a lot recently because like I mentioned earlier, I don't really like to talk about my personal life much, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but I've been dating someone recently, and it's lovely. And this is the first person I've dated since my breakup last year where I felt like, oh damn, you know what, he's amazing, I have no doubts on my part, I'm really, really into this. And it's really nice to just like feel excited about someone and feel so comfortable around them, and I feel really damn safe with him, which is lovely. But even so, I've found that opening myself up to the possibility of something with someone again has awakened a lot of like old anxiety sort of in my subconscious, and I've been having nightmares about my abusive ex again, and it's kind of thrown me a bit, and I've spoken to the person that I'm dating about this, and I've told him what's happening, and he's very, very understanding, and he's lovely. And I've said, like, logically, you've given me no reason not to trust you. Logically and emotionally, like, on a conscious level, I trust you, I feel really safe with you, I really like this. But in the back of my mind, my subconscious is like, yeah, but, you know, abusive ex seemed nice at first too, and you missed all his warning signs, so let's just, like, put some barriers up and protect yourself, yeah? And there's still that bit of, like, anxiety. There's still, like, well, what if you can't see the warning signs? What if this, you know? And like I say, he's been nothing but lovely and supportive about this, and even me explaining this to him, he's like, you know, yeah, I completely understand, that's completely normal, you're fine. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that how are you ever meant to 100% know if someone is a good person or not? You can't. You absolutely can't. How are you ever meant to know how a person will treat you in a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time? You can't. No one ever can. And so that's what kind of like a lot of relationships are. They're about taking that leap of faith and trusting someone. And that can be absolutely terrifying, but it can also be beautiful. And it can be terrifying, and it can absolutely screw you over and hurt you even more. And you never know. You just have to try and use what judgment you have and go for it. Or not, you know what I mean? And it's hard. You'll never be right 100% of the time. And that's why I would never ever judge someone for ending up with the wrong person or picking badly, because how were they meant to know? How can they ever really know? That idea that you better pick right or it's your fault he hurt you is entirely shifting the blame from the perpetrator to the victim, and that's absolutely not fair. That is not okay in any circumstance. And that's what Brett's doing, and that's what I have a real problem with.
And I also think that this whole conversation about postpartum beauty and husbands finding their wives attractive hinges on a very specific kind of beauty, like being supermodel hot, being back to the same weight that you were when you were 18 years old when you met your husband, like never aging. None of that is realistic, and it's also not realistic for him.
Yeah, exactly. But the only one here perpetuating this idea is you, Brett. And that other woman whose photo you showed under the guise of this is empowering and healthy, like, you two are the problem here. That's what's pushing this narrative. That you're the problem.
And you should not let the fear of what ifs and the TikTok fear mongering, the girl with the list who tells women all the reasons why they shouldn't have children, you should not let that stop you from wanting children because of your attachment to your current body. Because guys, it's going to change regardless.
Yeah, sure, but that's not why I don't want children, so I guess I'm okay, right? No, you don't think I'm okay. Anyway, I'm fed up with Brett now. This is where I'm going to leave this today. I've kind of missed doing these simple little response videos rather than the big heavy deep dives, I think, because they're a lot less emotionally draining for me. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll probably work on a couple more of these videos over the next few weeks and months if it's something that you guys are interested in. If you have any other videos that you would like me to respond to and talk about, then please either send me them as a link on Instagram, or you can leave it in a comment below, and I try and read all my comments as much as I can, so I'll definitely see it if you want to recommend something. YouTube isn't very good at like you having links in the comments, so if you just give me like the video title and the name of the channel, I'll find it that way. Don't worry about it. But yeah, any suggestions, please let me know down below. And yeah, thank you for watching today. I think, in conclusion, my main issues with Brett Cooper are, one, her cherry-picking information and never looking at the larger picture or nuances in any topic she talks about. Two, she does feel very young and naive, and she's incredibly ignorant on certain topics, which makes her very frustrating to watch. But she's also got that like youthful ego where she thinks she knows everything, and she says it all with such confidence that you can see how people end up eating up all this misinformation that she's spreading, and I think that makes her incredibly dangerous. And three, her opinions seem so inconsistent and surface level, and like a lot of the time she's just parroting what she hears from other people. So her conclusions end up muddled and hypocritical and unoriginal, and again, I find that quite dangerous when she's got such a big audience. And overall, I think it's quite a shame. But that is me done for today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. Just as a little update, anyone who ordered my little bookmark and sticker packs, I am currently just waiting on the actual bookmarks to be delivered, and I'll be shipping them all out to you very, very soon. So that's all gone ahead. Thank you so much to everyone who bought them. I'm a little bit overwhelmed by how many of you there are. So I'm going to be probably having to take a couple of trips to the post office with all the little parcels. But they're going to be coming out to you very, very soon. And in the meantime, if you want to help support my work or my channel, then I do have Patreon, where you can support me for as little as $1 a month. And at the higher tiers, you get these exclusive stickers and prints sent out to you every couple of months, which is really cute, and I love that. And I also have merch you can buy with some really cool t-shirt designs, some hoodies, I've got some little notebooks and all this cute stuff. And all of my merch is designed completely by me, except this really cute little octopus and book design, which I commissioned a wonderful artist called Amy to design for me, and it's fantastic. She is so damn talented, and I love being able to support smaller independent artists as well. So yeah, that's me done for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please leave a like, leave a comment. That really helps. If you're new here, it would be wonderful if you want to subscribe. I actually, you know what, I haven't I've always tried to ignore my subscriber count and not really think about it. I think the last time I was like, oh, get me to this level of number of subscribers was when I wanted to get to 50,000, which was when I was adopting Koo, my dog, my little Kyra, who's snoring in the background right now. But Yeah, I think, and this is a really silly thing, I really want to get to 375,000 subscribers. I think that would be lovely. It's such a nice number, and it's really, really big, and that's my goal for, like, the end of next year, I think. So if you want to try and help me get there, that would be wonderful. It's a big, big number to ask in a year, but by the end of 2026, I'd like to try and get 375,000. So if you'd like to try and help me get there, that would be wonderful, thank you. You can subscribe, you can share my videos with your friends or online, so that they can see if they like me too. And yeah, that's about it for today. I'm done rambling. I'm bad at the self-promotion stuff. Yes, okay, thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye.